Dr. Jazz.
I think all of us teaches, right? I mean, everyone teaches. I think that's
Yeah,
like, I think 90% of the musicians, it's,
sure. I mean, I often even tell my students, if you think you're going to go into a career as a performer, go ahead and look right up to Wynton Marsalis. I mean, everyone is teaching,
yeah,
and
everyone is teaching. Yeah, yeah.
and at the end of the day, it's a beautiful thing. I
Oh,
mean, it's
I love it. It's a nice thing. I'd rather do that than, I don't know, whatever. It's still music, and it's a noble thing to do, I think so.
yeah, no, and it enhances what we do, I think, as performers. I
Exactly.
sometimes I end up talking to students about their careers a lot of, and I often say there are like three: there's performing, there's composing, there's teaching. Those three things, and we try to keep the three of them somehow in balance.
Yeah. It's sometimes it's scary. When a friend of mine is ordered to subscribe to Downbeat, and then once a year they have this issue with all the universities,
Yeah.
and then it's like I just think of jazz guitar. How many jazz guitarists are produced every year in the States alone? We're talking about tens of thousands or thousands at least, like jazz
No, I think
guitarists. What are they gonna do, man? It's like it's crazy.
I, I think it's probably close to the tens of thousands. Maybe let's say 5,000.
Yeah, but it's insane.
It's a little insane. So my gig now, I teach primarily at a place called Long Island University,
Mhm.
just a little outside New York, and also at the New School.
Oh,
But in both places, I ended up being the guy. I'm not even teaching so much saxophone now. I'm ended up being the guy who teaches so-called entrepreneurship, which I mean, for me, the phrase that I use is sustainable creativity. So there are a lot of approaches and a lot of new approaches. And for the students who enter this particular program I teach in at Long Island University, I tell them, 10% of you might make a career doing something around this, which I think is an optimistic number. It's a good number.
mm,
Um, but those who are kind of doing it are going to be doing something that I don't even understand what it is. It has to be a whole new model of sustaining yourself aside from my model, which at the beginning was get in a van with a bunch of other guys and go play, and we
yeah.
did that. And I'm grateful that I experienced that part of it
So
too.
promoting actually CDs, right? And
Oh, of course.
LPs, and it's
Yeah.
changed. Yeah, it's changed. I mean, I don't know what's your view, but I mean, I want to ask you about the new album also.
Yeah.
But when I release an album now, I'm a little bit in doubt what to do. I still press CDs just for the gigs,
Yeah.
and then it's just the question of how to do it, and all these things. It's like, man, it's such a different environment, I think.
Well, I mean, so yeah, now I press limited CDs for press, for media. I have pressed on my label vinyls and done, okay sometimes. But so I teach, going back to education, I teach a seminar in record label management, which
Man, yeah,
in that one, the final project for the students has been create a physical object that delivers the music to your audience, but nothing that we've seen before. No
oh,
CDs, no cassettes, no USB stick. So they came up with some very creative things, such as a stuffed teddy bear that you squeeze it and it plays. I mean, like anything. It's so yes, things have to be reinvented constantly.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of your label, it's called Little Music, right? And how did you decide to do
little eye music.
I
Yeah, with the
music? Yeah.
yeah.
How did you decide to do it? And what's changed since you started it? I mean, how come you actually went this way? I'll put it like that first.
Yeah, and I mean, I've done releases with a number of other labels. One of my first releases was on Gunther Schuler's label, um, which was just a thrill to be, associated with Gunther, who's a hero of mine.
Sure.
But in the end, I wanted to release my own music because I wanted to be in charge of really not artistically, yes, but nobody ever had anything to say artistically, but really just be in charge of the timing of things. I was involved in some labels where they would say, great, we can release this one in 2 years. And, I don't like being in charge of not being in charge of the timing. So that part. And then the other thing, the little I, it's a phrase that comes from a utopian Christian sect in the United States known as the Shakers. And that's something that I've been very interested in over the years. So that's where the phrase comes from. But originally I was releasing music that kind of was on the borderline of different spiritual traditions and jazz improvised music. And I had a bunch of releases with a group of mine called Shakers and Bakers.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
But I think I had aspirations to be a real label and release music of my colleagues and stuff. And of course, I didn't have the money to do that. So it's been 14 releases of music, either mine or people very, very close to me. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's like so many of us, so many artists are doing it on their own also, including other labels. I mean, I do a release with a label sometimes, but mostly on my own. It's easier nowadays also with Bandcamp and all these platforms. It's quite, I mean, easier. Yes and no. I'll put it like that.
No, and it is nice to be in charge of all this around the timing.
Definitely. And so what's the story behind Guilty? It's it's a provocative piece of music, and you're kind of continuing the from Eightfold, where you're going with kind of right of, you had right concentration, right speech, right effort. I kind of connected it in a way also, but like, what's the story behind Guilty actually? I mean, if for the people who don't know the record yet.
Well, that is true. I hadn't thought about that until later, but there was a thread of connection between Eightfold Path and this one because of the right speech piece.
Yeah.
But I mean, I want to start by saying that Guilty with 3 exclamation marks is the shorthand title for the recording, because the Barbra Streisand album doesn't have the exclamation. But in fact, the name of the recording is the word guilty 34 times. And I really wanted to list it that way for Spotify, etc., but it would have been a mess. My distributor was like, no, let's just call it Guilty one time. But the proper name of the record is what's on the cover, which is the word guilty 34 times, with an obvious reference to a person whose name I won't mention. But in fact, like, if it was just, okay, another kind of left-leaning jazz musician who's got progressive liberal political values, sure, been there, done that, like, great, I'm all down. But this one, it was really, I don't know if people believe me or not, but it was really motivated by the issue of truth and lying more than right and left in politics. And I think that's what inspired me to do this particular album, was the fact that just knowing truth from lies is the crisis now, especially for young people. I mean, worldwide. It's not even just U.S. politics. It's all over. And I think we're really hitting a wall with certain political movements of people whose names I won't mention again, but also the confluence of that and AI and social media. There's a lot that's meeting at this point now, where the real core issue of this album is truth and lies. So that's what I was trying to address, more than right and left. Although I did find more liars on the right side of American politics. I tried to include some speech in this album from the other side, and so that's why there is one song with Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders. But more fun and hilarious examples from the Republicans, let's say.
Sure. Yeah. I'll glue the picture in the middle, okay, of the guy we're not naming. So.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But no, I know what you mean. Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah, it's in Europe the same. Like, the right wing is taking over in every country almost. So it's like almost scary. Even Germany, which obviously since the Second World War, this hasn't been going on, and now it's actually also happening there. So it's
I think with Germany also, it's very shocking to see that, because it's been kind of a beacon of a really progressive state for a long time, and so it's surprising to see it there too. It's all over, and we kind of, I think I did go into this making some assumptions about the jazz community, and that's another conversation. I really don't want to be exclusive in any way. I did find, though, a surprising amount. Yes, there are folks who are into the music who are more conservative in their political thought, and that's great. In a way,
Interesting.
those are the people that I want to speak to, in a way. Although there are not many people who listen to Albert Eiler who are there's not a cross section there of
No.
conservative.
That's
Yeah.
just like a research project for a student on a university, you know, like
Yeah, that's right. There'd be a very subculture of
exactly.
Republican free jazz lovers.
Exactly. How did this stands for the new album influence your writing? I mean, you've written beautiful melodies. I mean, that's what I love about your writing, like the idea of melody, you know, which I associate Eiler actually with this, and Ornette and all these guys with beautiful melodies. Like, how was your writing and composing influenced by the whole concept actually?
Yeah, well, thank you for that, because a lot of people don't hear the real melody in
Mm.
Eiler music. But
Oh
for
man,
me, it's all melody in Eiler's
it's
music.
singing. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the idea about this album was that there are 10 songs, and 8 of them are lies and 2 of them are truth. And the 2 songs that are truth are the Eiler piece and a piece by my teacher, the great clarinetist John Carter, which
Mm.
is called And She Speaks, which is on there too. But even the ones that I'm writing, my 8 original pieces, or 8 altogether, there were contributions by other band members, 1 or 2 by Kirk and Nafkia. But for me, it was, in some cases, in the title song Guilty, it's an exact transcription of speech song.
Yeah.
But in other ones, like, for example, there's a kind of a bebopper called Deportation Operation. And that kind of came from a phrase directly from the person that I won't mention, but because we just are triggered by his name at this point. And I don't put any speech samples of that person
Sure.
either, because it is triggering. Actually, but when I was started before we recorded, I spoke to my friend Stephen Bernstein,
Yeah.
the trumpet player, and he said, "Man, why are you going to empower those guys by even making music around it?" And at that point, I decided not to include an actual speech sample by the Republican candidate, but it was this, again, the idea of truthing and lying, and the speech patterns of some of these folks are really actually fairly musical. So,
Yeah.
for example, George Santos is really one of my favorite political characters in the United States, because he's so bizarre and so interesting and dramatic. So when I was setting a piece for Santos, the bossa for Santos, clearly it had to be a bossa, because he has a whole backstory about his history in Brazil,
Background.
which
Yeah.
I'm really not sure what part of that is true and what's not. But so in writing, each speech pattern suggested a different kind of cadence to it.
Quite cool.
In the first song, Buzzsaw, which is speech by Marjorie Taylor Greene, she was actually speaking in that. And a thing, Curtis Hasselbring manipulated the electronics with me. I didn't want to put in any chunks of speech that were big enough that you would really know the context, but just use them as musical pieces. So in Buzzsaw, the speech that she was giving in Congress was actually about her wanting to turn away from support for Ukraine in that. And she used the word buzzsaw in a way, I mean, she had a terrible tone of voice anyway. It's just awful to listen to. But so that suggested a direction for the melody. And in the lead sheet for that one, Buzzsaw, I think my direction is March a la Shostakovich, because I was really feeling Shostakovich in that speech of hers, and just that feeling. So yeah.
Now, how are you going to do that live, incorporating electronics? I mean, is Curtis going to do that live, or?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we've done a couple performances, and I've even gone out and done this as a performance where I work with community musicians in other places. So it's actually started in Washington, D.C., and I collaborated with musicians there. I was doing a workshop at a high school, a prep school in D.C., Georgetown, and many of the students there were actually the sons and daughters of. So I had this on my mind, and I thought I'd bring it to them first. That happened earlier this year. And so I came down just with the samples on my laptop. Curtis is much more skillful than I am. at doing this, but I do a kind of a version of it myself. And then I had them doing some of these pieces and improvisations along with the speech samples.
Mm.
So it actually is really fun to do live. And I assume on the gigs, the songs will sound, of course, different because it's jazz. They'll sound different than the recordings. There's some great laptop artists out there now, Curtis among them. But also I happened to see Chris Davis's group live, which I hadn't seen. I don't know if you know
Sure,
this
sure.
one, trio with Val Genti.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, it's really become a new, I mean, it's been out there for quite a while, but it's become a new thing to really feel the laptop artist as a member of the band
Yeah,
and improvising with the band. It's really great.
yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, where it's going. But it's good in a positive way, at least.
I think so,
The
yeah.
technology. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
scary in a way, but uh,
Mm. Yeah.
what's your? We mentioned Curtis already, and you know, you mentioned Kirk, and you know, I have you on so many Matt Wilson's records, and but I wanted to ask you about the band. I mean, I know with Bob and Kirk, you've have a long-standing relationship, and also with Matt. Like, what's the story with all these musicians? Like, how did you meet? And
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, Matt is really the longest one. That's 30 plus years
Ooh,
of
man,
a
okay,
deep friendship and deep playing relationship to the point now where, I mean, he's in many of my bands, I'm in many of his, and we just kind of breathe together in a musical way. And it's really a beautiful thing. I mean, I can't overstate what a gift that is. And that's another thing I tell the students to have a few relationships in my life that have lasted this long in the music. It's just a beautiful gift,
mm.
from the universe.
When did you guys meet? Actually, the first time or play? You remember?
Yeah, early 1990s in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Matt loves to tell the story. He told it last week in a university in Ohio. Um, we were in a rehearsal band playing swing charts, and he remembers it better. And I start playing a solo on maybe Count Basie or whatever it is. And he said there's something about the sound that he was instantly connected to. I mean, I think that's from our shared lineage
Hmm.
of listening and playing. And of course, I adore Dewey Redman, and Matt was Dewey's drummer for years and years.
Yeah.
Um, but and for me, something in the feel of his cymbal, it was just a kind of an instant connection, almost supernatural. Like, you get that bolt of lightning only a few times in your life, I think. And it's really special when it happens.
Mm.
But at the same time, it's also, you have to pay attention to it. And then we've nurtured it now for 3 decades, and it's been really fruitful.
That's,
So
yeah.
there are a lot of different bands, but the core of this thing is actually out of a band I put together um, with Matt, as you said, Bob Stewart,
Yeah.
who I introduce on the gigs when we do gigs as a person who redefined his instrument for contemporary jazz. And I mean, that's without question. Bob
Yeah. Yeah.
created the tuba. I was a huge fan of course, all the Arthur Blythe recordings and the other things he had done. And then I had a chance to do a kind of a free improvisation round robin event with him. And again, it was like the instant connection between the sounds. And so I pursued that like immediately, like, I
Mm.
want to play more with you, Bob. And luckily he was open to that. And Kirk came into Matt Wilson's
Yeah.
quartet maybe,
That's,
geez, 15 years ago when Andrew D'Angelo left, Kirk came. So we all have really long connections, but that quartet of Kirk, Bob, Matt, and me, previously, we have a band that does a kind of a postmodern take on trad jazz, which is called Swing and Dix, but I no longer say that.
yeah, I saw that.
I was kind of forced into that by my adult daughters who were like, "You really can't use that name anymore. It's
Come on,
not.
I
It's
love it
no
actually.
longer funny."
Yeah, yeah. Well, for us maybe it is. But okay.
Yeah, I think it's
But I
still
know what you
funny.
mean. Yeah. Okay.
Um, so I had to get rid of that name. So now we're just a unit, but it's that core band. And then I brought in Curtis to this recording to do the electronics as well as play some trombone, which he's amazing at. And
Yeah.
of course, my wife, the vocalist Mary LaRose, she's always a part of things I do. So she sang a couple of the things beautifully. She sang the John Carter piece. Then I made her do. I forced her into doing the bossa, which she thought was silly, but I think it's great.
No, I love this that you have these long relationships with these musicians. It's just like I think it reflects the music, and it's easier for you to write because you know exactly how the drums will sound, or you as a composer, I guess that's so crucial. You know what you get from the trumpet or whatever or tuba, and yeah.
Yeah, I really do. And I think we can say each of these three musicians, Bob, Kirk, and Matt, have a pretty, really individual approach to their instruments. I do know what they can do. And
Yeah.
I know, for example, I can ask Bob to play a vamp for a solo section, which he does on a few of these pieces. And I don't even have to worry about the development of the sections in the improvising. That is, I have some tunes with forms, but when we got to the session, I trust him more to handle that. So we
Mm.
do kind of play through forms, but he just moves through it so brilliantly on his own timing. I'm like, Bob, we'll feel it together rather than setting numbers of bars. And it really works that way.
Yeah, beautiful. I love the tuba, by the way. I mean, it's such a
Oh,
great instrument.
it
It's
is great. Yeah.
it's
It
such a
presents,
different vibe than a double bass. I mean,
yeah, it really
yeah.
is. It creates a whole different feeling in the blowing. And the way that Matt plays when he's playing with Bob is really unique, you know.
Mm.
The way he plays with different musicians is interesting. Uh, in fact, just last weekend, my dear friend Matt Wilson got married.
Mm. Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Married. And at the wedding, there was a small bass contingent that included like 10 of the world's greatest bass players were there, you know. But he plays with each one of them differently. And with Bob Stewart, he plays in a way that's very different. And it's hard for me to put in words. But when I described it to him, I said I felt like I was playing a bit with one of my favorite bands. Not that we, model ourselves, but it felt like Threadgill's Air band.
yeah. Mm.
Drummer Steve McCall had a
Sure.
way of approaching the instrument that Matt was giving that kind of air to the sound. And I think that is because the tuba fills up more bandwidth in the note than the bass. So Matt's able to give that kind of air in the
Mm.
space in the sound that maybe with just with a bassist he would want to keep momentum going more. I
Exactly.
don't.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I played with tuba like 15 years with Michel Godard, like a French tuba player.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
I know the tuba is just like such a different vibe. It's like sonically, it creates such a different space, and
It's a beautiful thing. And
it's a
again,
beautiful thing. Yeah,
hats off to Bob because I think Bob was the one who helped that instrument transition into the contemporary world.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
yeah.
definitely. You mentioned John Carter and Albert Ayler, and what got you into improvised music? I mean, talking about maybe late 70s, early 80s. I mean, did you have like an aha moment that you said like, shit, I want to do this, or how did this happen?
Yeah, a couple of great moments, and the world gave me a lot of really nice gifts. But there was with Eiler's music, there was a particular moment of freshman year of college. I was in college near Cleveland, Ohio, Oberlin, and my teacher, great composer Wendell Logan, sent me down to the library to listen to Albert Eiler Love Call, and
Mm,
that was a very much a moment. It was just like it was definitely before and after chapters of life,
mm,
and my love of his music has continued, and I've treated it in a lot of different ways. And all my bands have treated Eiler music. I have one group called Brooklyn Blowhards where we merged sea shanties with Eiler's music, and that,
that's
as odd as it sounds, it worked really well. So I've done a lot with his music, and then like I got this incredible opportunity to co-produce a box set that came out 2 years ago, Revelations, which is the first complete recording of Albert Eiler's final performances in total remastered sound, and
mm,
it just kind of felt surreal and amazing to me to be able to be a part of the team that shared that with the world. So it was really cool.
mm,
Yeah, and
yeah.
with John Carter, which I'm really happy that you know John Carter's music. I
Oh
mean,
man, one of
not
the
every,
underrated greats, I think. There's so many guys out there who are,
yeah.
yeah.
So that does go back to Los Angeles where I grew up and a
Mm,
summer, and it would be the summer, not quite 70s, actually 81, 82, when I found a workshop situation in West LA, Culver City. Some people had rented out a garage, and on Saturdays they would give music workshops. It was called the College of Winds. And for kids, the faculty was John Carter, James Newton on the flute, Bobby Bradford was there,
Oh
and
man, really?
speaking of tuba and bass, Red Callender was there. But it was just a crazy thing. And, we didn't work on avant-garde music or free improvising. We worked on songs. And I remember working out the melody of Body and Soul with John Carter. And I'm like, there's something very special about this guy, like you could tell, although he was a high school band director, so he had this air of just being a high school band director, but you could tell there was something special.
Mm.
So that was an amazing, really lasted just for that one summer, but that turned me on to John Carter, although I gotta say, I still discover little things that he had done because his work is not it's well documented,
Yeah.
but it's not all readily available. So there's little releases that are not easy to find,
Mm. Yeah.
including
Yeah.
releases with Bob Stewart on tuba. There's Live from Moors, and
Really?
there's
Oh wow. Okay. That's fine.
Bob was part of the ensemble
I didn't know.
for a
Okay.
while. Yeah,
Wow.
there's some great ones. But the other thing from John Carter, I think maybe is the recordings that impacted me the most were on Polygram when he had this moment on a kind of a bigger label
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
budget, and he was able to make the recordings Castles of Ghana, and then Shadow on a Wall. And these recordings had larger ensembles, but they're so beautifully orchestrated into this kind of narrative.
Mm.
And that really inspired me. And I try to bring that to a lot of the recordings I do, not just a collection of songs, but a kind of a storytelling
Story.
aspect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's important. Yeah. When did you decide to move to New York? How did that happen? I mean, you were in LA and then you went to Ohio and then like how come you didn't go back to the West Coast? And
Well, that's exactly it. And I did go back for 1 year to Los Angeles, and I was painting apartments and playing in a terrible rock band. And anyway, so I did get the feeling, although I do love Los Angeles in certain ways, but I did get the feeling I couldn't really realize the musical vision I wanted to realize there. So I decided to come to New York. I had friends who moved, and
okay.
they had a room in their house on Staten Island, and the room cost $100 a month, which was, hey, can't beat it. There was 9 horn players in the house.
Ooh,
It was an old falling down house in Staten Island. So I took a chance, and I my strategy going in was to check it out for 1 year, and that's 30 whatever years ago. But it worked out well, and the house was really lively. A bunch of Staten Island musicians showed up, and there was a rehearsals in the basement, and the band In Living Color would fall by before
ooh,
they were hitting, and a lot of really serious musicians. I remember there's a tenor player named Walter Blanding. He was in the
sure.
Jazz at Lincoln Center Organ.
Yeah.
Walter come by when he was 10 years old. So it was a scene at the house, and somehow I managed to get a foothold because, like we were talking about, at that time there really were gigs in New York. So I managed to latch onto not only local things but also some road gigs. I started working with the Four Freshmen, 1950s vocal group.
Yeah. Oh wow, really? Oh, okay.
Fantastic music. So I was on the road with them for a year or two, and
Wow.
just kind of doing the scuffle until I could get a foothold. And I'm really lucky that I got to stay here. And now I have a Brooklyn house and a Brooklyn wife and Brooklyn kids and a Brooklyn dog.
You're a Brooklyner.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who were the first guys you hooked up with, actually? I mean, you mentioned Matt, like, which was quite early, actually, but uh,
Yeah.
who were the first gigs you got, and how did you get them? I mean, like going to sessions or like because
Yeah. Well, I think I see now some of the important things that happen. Well, first of all, I started studying when I could afford to with Dave Liebman,
oh, really?
and
Okay.
also with Joe Lovano. And just getting those two approaches was incredibly mind-blowing. But I started, meeting my peers like Matt. We were both kind of coming from a jazz place, but I also, at that time, pretty early on, had the opportunity to start jumping into the New York Latin music scene.
Yeah, I have you
And
on one CD with Jimmy Bosch. I wanted to ask you about.
many CDs with Jimmy Bosch. I think I've been on all the CDs he's produced as a leader.
Oh wow, man! I have one a CD of his like Soneando trombone, and I checked this today. I was like, Jeff, really? Okay. I
No,
wanted to.
that's one, man. That's the first one. There were about 5 after that.
Oh, wow,
And in
okay.
fact, when I was in Ljubljana,
Yeah.
that was we were traveling with Jimmy.
Oh,
So
wait, you were on that TV show, right? Then
there was a TV show the second time he
I was
came,
on
and
that gig. So
what?
you
Oh,
played.
so funny, but I wasn't there the second
Ah, you
time.
weren't. Okay, okay. But I was on
Mario,
that gig, so looking at it,
oh man,
in the audience. Wow.
I
Okay.
think it was Mario Rivera that time.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Mario. But no, I traveled, played with Jimmy. I just fell in like, oh, into that scene. Like, if you can read music, you can go do these gigs. And immediately I was like, wow, this is a really deep musical culture with its own history, its own performance practices, really, equal to that of what we call jazz music. And and it was amazing that I had a chance to just kind of jump into it. And
Mm.
again, that was because I played a wedding gig with Jimmy, and the sound of our horns just felt right together. So he said, "Hey Jeff, I'm band leading at SOBs at that time. Come join me on my first gig." And on the first gig, he puts me up there trading eights with a guy named Chocolate Armenteros, who more or less invented trumpet style, a Cuban musician that moved to New York early on. I mean, and everyone knew I didn't know what I was doing, but I learned. It took me a while, but eventually I learned, and at least I think I went into it with an honest enough feeling that people recognized that and kept me around long enough for me to learn what's actually happening in
Mm.
music. So, but
Fantastic.
that's been a great relationship with Jimmy for many, many years. That's one of those important relationships as well.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah, that you have this side as well. Like the
Yeah.
Latin side. Quite cool. I mean,
Well,
beautiful.
yeah, it's led me to a lot of cool places. So now I'm also playing a lot with Bobby Sanabria,
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
big band. And I just did a recording last week of a beautiful Venezuelan pianist and composer named Silvano Monasterios.
Oh, don't know.
Um,
Okay.
Incredible kind of chamber Latin jazz. And on that one, it's all bass clarinet. And he brought Nestor Torres up from Miami. It's just an incredible ensemble of really
Okay.
beautiful music that Silvano wrote that'll be out, I think, next year.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
How did the band leading start for you? I mean, like if we talk about Soundwatcher, that's a monster record, and I mean Matt is kind of the obvious choice for me there, but like Buster Williams, how does he come into the equation? And I
Yeah.
mean Jamie, kind of okay, he's around in the scene. Like, what's the story behind that record?
Yeah, yeah. Jamie also, he's kind of in my world, and
Yeah,
we've been collaborators for a long time, and he's fantastic. No, Buster was definitely the odd one out there, and that was on Matt's encouragement. Matt has that kind of intergenerational vision, and he's very close with Buster. He's also very close with Cecil McBee. He loves that generation of
yeah,
bassists. He
yeah.
said, "Hey Jeff," because I had the idea to do that session, and he's not that on that one, not Albert Eiler music, but just music with a little of that feeling. And he said, "Man, call Buster." And I'm like, "Really, Matt? He doesn't know me." So I did. He was totally gracious. He didn't look at the music in advance. He didn't need to. And actually, the thing that was kind of magical about it, as days in advance of the studio date, I said, "Well, Mr. Williams, what what microphones do you prefer? What preamps do you?" I wanted to make it very good so he was really comfortable. He says, "No, no, just plug me into the board direct." So I just plug the bass into the mixing board, and from the first note, it's instantly Buster
Yeah.
Williams. It's just like, wow. And then it took me like one or two takes on that date to get over like, oh my God, I'm playing with Buster Williams. And then finally, like, no, actually, oh my God, I'm just playing with this really playful,
Mm,
joyful, fun spirit in the music. So
mm.
it
So
was it was a joyful date. Yeah, it was great.
it was easy for you to the band leading thing. I mean, like always.
It, it has been, yeah. I think
Yeah.
I'm a Leo, and I've actually even been accused of being an alpha male, which I deny. But the leading part has been pretty natural to me all along. I've had the gift of having a pretty clear vision of what I want
Yeah.
out of any particular album or any particular project, and yet and then picking the right people, asking the right people to be there who I know will take that vision even farther. Like, just, but it is important. sometimes I've gone to a session as a side person, and you can get something like, no, man, play whatever you want, but it's great to have a balance of people who really kind of set up some interesting structures for you and then tell you, go ahead and do your thing, right? Like it's nice to have that balance.
Yeah, yeah,
So I
yeah.
think I had that, and I'm pretty organized enough to have charts that people can look at and read.
That's
And
important. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, it's important.
that's an
So
important thing. Yeah, like
yeah.
how did for you as a writer and as a band leader, the thing changed when Swallow came in the band? Because it's a quite a different story, and Steve, equally a master bass player. Like, and how did Swallow come into the occasion?
Yeah, I mean, that's really an interesting transition. And that
Yeah,
again was personal relationship, as a lot of these things are.
with Jamie,
So
right?
Swallow was collaborating with Jamie
Yeah,
Saft.
okay.
Um, that was an interesting session. So the way the Eightfold Path album happened was, now I look back on it, I'm like, it was really kind of in the spirit of the Buddhist writings that I was inspired by. But that was kind of deep in COVID time, and we were just at the point. I guess I got a call from Jamie Saft, who was living in Woodstock at the time, and he said, "Hey Jeff, you got to come down." I was in Vermont in a little cabin. He says, "You got to come down. I'm playing, and I'm recording with people out on my front lawn outside, so it was safe." And I was like, "Okay, great, man. I'm going to come down." And then I said, "Hey, Matt, like we hadn't played." I'm like, "Matt, come up. We're playing at Jamie's house and it'll be outdoors." Like, man, he's there. And then Jamie says, "Well, we're going to have the band. Why don't you invite Swallow? He's right there, my neighbor in Woodstock." I said, "Are you kidding?" And it was
Oh,
another
beautiful.
just incredible that he was able to do that. So Steve was actually inside the house in his own room, and me and Matt were outside on a lawn, and it was a light rain happening. So it was the only recording session ever with a rain delay, but there was a rain delay. And then we just stood inside the garage hearing Steve Swallow tell stories about Bill Evans. Incredible.
Oh man, yeah, that's.
And I think I talked you have done a talk with Steve
Oh
Swallow, right?
man, oh man. I think we talked like 1 hour about poetry, like because he's a poetry buff and I studied poetry as well, and
Yeah.
like
Well,
Robert Creeley for 1 hour, like, but yeah, beautiful.
I
Yeah.
well, I don't have to tell you, he's a beautiful cat.
Oh man. Yeah.
And so on that album, Eightfold Path, by the time the rain had stopped, we were like, okay, we need to now have 2 hours, 3 hours to do this recording. So everything on that album is not the first take, it's the first reading of any of the songs.
Oh,
First time.
that's great.
And the idea was, the songs are all quite simple, little 8-bar compositions, but it was pretty fun that they were all literally the first time we had read them is what's on the record.
Mm, beautiful.
And if you listen carefully, you can hear some crickets in the
Really?
drum.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah,
Okay. I have to check it. I love these moments, by the way.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
it's I did like during COVID. I did Eric Dolphis. I took all of his compositions and I arranged them for acoustic guitar, and I
Oh, you're kidding?
recorded. Yeah, I'll send you a link, and
Oh
it's
man.
it's and I left my, I did it with really good mics in my living room. It was COVID. And then on
Yeah.
two tunes, my cat, like, I do like the perfect take, like of something. And then like the strings ring out and then my cat walks like, wow.
Uh,
And I was like, shit, I'll leave that in because it was like the best take, I cannot. And you
yeah.
actually hear the meow in the end, like when the strings ring out. It's so, so great.
No, I love it when you hear that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
The
it's,
environment.
it's not so sterile. And
Maybe the
uh,
cat was the spirit of Dolphy on there or something.
oh man, yeah. But
That's
yeah,
amazing. Well, I can imagine Dolphy on guitar being a particular challenge.
yeah.
Something.
I just didn't want to go, to the Joe Pass, Ben Monder complexity. I just tried to play. I mean, kind of harmonize the lines of multiple horns.
Yeah.
And just play a lot of single lines. I was like, fuck, man. Oh, sorry, but just I cannot compete with Joe Pass or with Monder like these approaches. I was like, oh no, let's go for it. And I felt really liberated, even
Yeah,
though
that's
it's a harmonic instrument. I played single lines, and I was like, man, okay.
Oh, how interesting. Beautiful. Well, do want to say that my favorite solo guitar album of all time was an album called Saints, recorded by Mark Rebo.
Oh,
And in fact, he recorded that one in his home as well. But
yeah,
it counts.
Yeah,
Great.
Rebo. I mean, you played with him, so you know.
Yeah, we did a collaboration, and he's just fantastic.
Yeah, I love his more avant-garde stuff, the early stuff, like with the Los Cubanos Postizos. I
Yeah.
mean, it's great, obviously, what he does, but just his not so popular side, it's killing. It's just
Yeah, no, he's got a pretty wide range of what he
yeah,
likes to do.
yeah,
There's a lot.
which is great. Yeah. Uh, Jeff, I wanted to ask you, how are you going to promote the new album? I know there's like a big streaming thing coming on, and
Yeah.
is there a tour also coming in next year? Maybe coming to Europe or?
Not yet. I mean, I don't have a tour for this group, and I'm really. Is a funny thing about this particular release is that the music is very timely. So the question is, once November 5th arrives, what happens to the music? So I don't know yet. Although it is a great band and we'll be out playing, and we'll see what happens in the election. But this really was focused on this one event in the world, which is the election. And I don't know what you're feeling or hearing, but it's absolutely could go any direction. There's no question.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, the event, rather than a traditional gig, CD release, whatever event, I decided to create an event on both a hybrid of live performances and on live stream. And it's really happening. I was just meeting on it this morning. I'm really excited. So it's called Truth is Marching In after the Eiler tune. So if anybody gets to view this in time, it's truthismarchingin.org. That's our central website. So what'll happen that night is 5 groups in 5 different cities will be playing simultaneously 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, playing their own music, maybe some songs from my album, but maybe some of their own things too. And the cities involved, and this is Monday, November 4th, the cities involved are Los Angeles, Columbus, Ohio, Milwaukee, Washington, D.C., New York City, and St. Louis, where I'll be. So I'll be playing with Matt Wilson, Ben Allison, and some other folks in St. Louis. But what's really exciting news that I just want to share here is on November 4th, the New York City gig will be led by the aforementioned Stephen Bernstein. And Shifter Lab in Brooklyn, he'll be leading a sex mob brass party. And so it happens from 8 to 9 p.m. But then from 9 to 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time that night, all the groups will be playing one composition and improvising. And that composition is Eiler's theme, Truth is Marching In. It won't be, we're not doing a technological synchronized thing. We're not hearing each other. So the viewer or the listener from the site, truthismarchingin.org, will be able to open as many of the 5 windows as they want. And they'll be encouraged to open all 5. And there's some sort of metaphor here for democracy or political action, but it's not too exact. But I think it'll be really groovy. And I announced the other day on the microphone that on that night we'll be swinging the vote. We'll be swinging the vote psychically. That's it. Yes, we're going to swing the election from a psychic perspective. There's no fundraising at that point. There's nothing left that night except for just let's put out the good energy.
It'll be interesting, but good way to promote it actually, and yeah, it's different.
Yeah,
I think it's nice.
I like the feeling. We all face, like, talking about the entrepreneurship thing.
What we said. Yeah.
Constantly putting out our art, and we want to sustain our creativity, but it feels good when it's linked to a broader positive vision or goal. So it's nice.
Yeah. What about Europe? Any plans of Europe tours, or it's hard, right?
We'll see for next year with this group or other groups. I have the most recent recording before this was called Schoenberg on the Beach.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And I think that one really resonated as far as listeners in Europe. And I think it would be I would love to bring that one to Europe. In fact, I was invited by the Schoenberg Foundation. They're doing a symposium in Vienna on Schoenberg and jazz. And they invited me to come and speak and play, but it's actually happening on the same weekend as the election.
Come on. Oh, shit.
So I won't make it to Vienna for that, but I really hope to bring Schoenberg on the Beach to Europe next summer. That's the one I'm going to try to bring over.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff, thanks so much, man, for sharing some of these thoughts. And next time when you're in Europe, drop me a line. We get together for some nice wine and stuff and food and whatever, play, whatever.
I know your wine is good there, so I will take you up on it, Samo.
Yeah, we have a guest room here if you need a place to stay for a day or
Oh,
two,
nice.
whatever. So just
Well,
drop me a line. It's my email is my website, so you can find it.
yeah. Okay, I'll grab it. And yeah, we'll be in Europe with Joe Fonda's
Oh, really? Oh, when is that?
the Joe Fonda. So we'll be around next. There's a
Fantastic.
new recording coming out on a Polish label with myself, Joe Fonda, Reese Organ, and Michael Basunas. Just kind of woodwinds and rhythm section.
Really? Oh, fantastic, man.
Um,
Beautiful.
I think the planning is for late spring. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, well, drop me a line and we'll get together if you're in
All right.
Austria. So, cool. Jeff, good luck with everything.
Cool.
So, and stay in touch.
All right.
Okay, bye. Ciao.
Thanks for the invitation to talk.
Thank you.
Ciao.